Hello and welcome. We're here to discuss art in the creative economy, and I'm thrilled that we have such a diverse group of panelists here who will be able to weigh in. We won't be doing introductions, but I encourage you to visit their speaker bios on the forum portal. As we were talking about earlier, before this went live, the good news is that everyone knows at this point that art and culture and the art market have been able to thrive online to varying degrees. And so our question and what this roundtable will address is what it means for the future. And I think I would like to kick things off with a question that will hopefully be applicable to everyone or nearly everyone here on this panel. And I alluded to this before. Is there a value to distinguishing online and in-person content as we move back to in-person events? Because after all, many of your revenue streams rely on people actually showing up. Simon, maybe do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. It's great to be part of this illustrious group. I'm from Frieze. And as you hopefully know, Frieze are a publisher and we also run art fairs. And we're excited about going forwards, having both physical events and digital events happening simultaneously, one building off the other, but also potentially them happening at different times of the year. We just ran a fair in New York. It was the first time we had an in-person event for some time. It was very exciting. But it was also the first time that we had an in-person event and a digital event running at the same time. And it's obvious that what the digital event is able to do is to enable people who couldn't get to New York to see the art that was available, as it happens, in the shed where we held our fair. And that was great because, you know, clearly it was very difficult to travel to New York. There were all sorts of restrictions. And so the ability to extend your audience using the power of technology and internet has been hugely beneficial, and artists have been able to sell to a much bigger audience. So that is just one of the advantages, and I'm sure we'll speak of others about having these two things happening in parallel.
Bettina, from your side, from a more programmatic side in terms of museum engagement, is there a value to drawing people into a physical space as opposed to simply providing a digital program?
Absolutely. I mean, what's interesting is the Serpentine, which is a contemporary art institution based in Kensington Gardens, we've actually dropped the name galleries from our title because we don't want to be so tethered to the idea of a physical space. But at the same time, we think that audiences don't differentiate between in-person and virtual experiences when they consider their relationship with organizations. We really see it as two sides of the same coin. And the metaverse is upon us. I mean, people are playing video games, they're living in virtual worlds. And I think it's also really important, particularly for cultural institutions, to think about what our role is in these developing virtual worlds and what does it mean to be a kind of civic organization in that context, where audiences are moving from being passive spectators to being actively engaged. When you play a video game, you're at the center of the world. And we're really thinking about that future and how we'll participate in it.
I mean, the Serpentine is lucky in the sense that you don't charge admission. And in that respect, it's quite freeing because it is not a necessary revenue stream, that kind of physical presence. Is there anyone else on this panel for whom that's not the case and for whom that hybridization presents problems? Wow. Noah, I mean, this doesn't ring in whatever way false to you in terms of the exigency of having people show up and attend in person?
No, I mean, I think in a sense to the contrary, already we're seeing and having just done our show in Hong Kong in late May, the desire for in-person, whether paid or unpaid, is tremendous right now. And I think, what we're going to see slingshotting already in the summer period. I mean, New York for the last several months now has been buzzing. The museum and gallery landscape has been tremendously exciting, and we're already seeing enormous anticipation in advance of our show in Basel this fall and Miami as well come December. So I think really what we're going to see coming out of this is clearly a far more hybridized, digitally forward future in terms of the merger of these two realms. But I don't think at all that the IRL experience is going to be subjugated to demands from the digital world. To the contrary, I think the digital world is going to help radically empower these online these in-person experiences, and that they'll be even more in demand, at least the good ones, right? That really deliver something unique and create the right mode of both content generation, but also learning, in-person engagement, so on and so forth. And we as an organization are already seeing that very clearly.
If I can jump, oh, sorry.
Go on.
No, please, after you.
We also found out that in Lagos, during the lockdown, a lot of exhibitions went online, and surprisingly, we got a lot of attendance. People, there's a connection that people feel to a space, irrespective of the fact that they're not able to visit physically. And that online followership came back again to, there's this hybriding of the whole situation. When we opened our doors again, we had more participation in our exhibitions post-COVID than we ever had. So it suggests that people actually did long for personal touch, that engagement that you get when you get into a physical space, knowing who your gallery owners are. There's the relationship that you forged with the community that follows you. And I think that what is going to happen with online participation is that it's just going to enhance what we have in the physical spaces, as opposed to one doing without the other.
I was just gonna add in that probably with the exception of the cultural institutions on the panel, what's interesting about the art world, and in some ways the luxury world as well, since the two industries are somewhat adjacent, is that for the most part, the art world doesn't need many people to show up physically in person in order for its business goals to be successful. And I think whether it's an auction house like Christie's or it's a fair like Frieze or Art Basel, as long as the people who are going to show up in person are going to show up. And technology and online just allows us to broaden the pool and the audience even more. In no way does it cannibalize the original business.
Yeah, I mean, just to play off that, one thing that we saw already, which was fascinating, having just hosted our fair in Hong Kong, which had over 30,000 attendees, really from the city itself. Having just looked at our stats from OVR Portals, which was our seventh standalone online viewing room since we started doing this over the last year and a half, we had a notable increase in visitors from Asia, right? Which was fascinating. So in a sense, you see how that growth, not just generally during COVID, but quite specifically on the back of having not just done our first IRL fair in over a year, but also having launched our Art Basel Live platform, which was really this hybridized platform directly fed back into viewership for an online-only event that we hosted less than a month after that. So I think we're all in different ways going to be seeing this in the digital space, as I'm sure maybe might be worth bringing Mike in on the artsy side here, is a fascinating way to test that and to work with our varying partners and constituents to grow those audiences.
Yeah, James, I would first I've seen this in a number of industries where digital transformation takes place, and the subsequent conversation is all about whether online will win or offline will win, and it's in every instance the wrong framing of the problem or the wrong framing of the discussion. If you look at the art world, we're all going back to art fairs. We all can't wait to be in museums and galleries. That's the human condition. We love being together in person, and it's not going to change. The problem with the art world is different. The art world is too small. 5% of what the art world is 5% the size of the addressable market for jewelry, even though we all love art. 95% of working artists earn below the poverty line, even though we all love art. And the reason is, if you look at what the art world was like historically, if you look at the art world before the internet, prices were opaque. The art world was not welcoming enough to everyone. It didn't feel inclusive enough, and the transaction wasn't easy. And as a result, if you just looked at an addressable market of people with wealth, which would be to constrain the market unfairly, but if you just looked at that, 17 million people who hold $50 trillion worth of wealth in the last 12 months bought cars, handbags, jewelries, and not art. And what I think is so exciting about the transformation that's happening right now is that all the people who love art fairs are going to keep going to art fairs. Everyone who loves galleries will keep going to galleries. But the millions and millions and millions of people who have not been actively participating in the art world are now finding their way into the art world because the art is available online, because the art is priced online, and because the art is enabled for transaction online. And in my company, Artsy, where we cooperate with 4,000 galleries in 100 countries around the world, 35 plus auction houses, 100 art fairs, we've brought together 1 million works of art in one place from the world's most in-demand artists and empowered buyers with the tools and the insights to be able to bring it into their home. I think that's the exciting change that's happening in the art world right now.
Well, we've seen, as you say, this tremendous growth in people's participation in purchasing things online. Not only the fact that they're willing to do it, but the prices that they're willing to spend. And the optimistic thing to do is look at this like you have an infinitely scalable field. That the alternative, though, is to look at this last year like you all have had a captive audience. And you have had a group of people who are not leaving their house, really. You have them still making money with more disposable income and less places to spend it. How do you keep that going? How do you, in whatever way, keep that engagement with online consumption and consumption more generally, when you know for a fact that there are going to be other demands on people's spending power in terms of restaurants, in terms of travel, in terms of whatever else that they haven't been spending money on for the last 15 months? Dirk, I saw you nodding.
Well, I think Chris is a bit of the odd one here in this circle, because we are firmly on the secondary market. So unlike Art Basel or Artsy, we are not really, or only in exceptions, working with really young, fresh art. And what we've seen is an interesting move. One could see over the past 2 decades in the markets for industrialized luxury, that in the old days people would go to a boutique to buy an expensive handbag or perhaps shoes because they felt they needed to try them on and to feel the leather and to see the color, etc. And since many years, since 15 years, these businesses are growing twice as fast online than in their flagship stores on Madison Avenue or Regent Street. And this is what we've experienced last year in the art world, that the interaction with the original, the perception of the artwork is now taken behind the acquisition of it. So it's delivered to your house and then you see it for the first time. And you can see that parts of that has to do with the way the industry has learned to present things better online with all the whatever, Zoom, 800% Zoom, the online viewing rooms, this and that and the other. videos, more content, It's certainly not the warranty, I would think. It is just that it has become so comfortable to do that. And I think even if the pendulum swings back and people, as Mike said, people want to meet other people, they will go back into museums, and we've all started, they still will remember how easy it is to buy an artwork, at least up to a certain glass ceiling. And in our industry, that glass ceiling used to be around $10,000 up to 2019. It's now somewhere between 50 and 100,000. And that's exactly the interesting bracket for the next generation of buyers. So I think even if they go out to restaurants, they will still kind of go to Art Basel's online viewing rooms and browse the Christie's auction catalogs. That's at least my view. Hope, too.
Noah, I see you have a raised hand.
I'm glad I've mastered the hand-raising function over the last 18 months. I have a simple answer, which is basically that it's about content. It's about good content, right? There was a moment pre-COVID where the general modus operandi, both of galleries and artists to some extent, and different constituents in the art market, was to not necessarily put their best things online. And I think the last year and change has proven that that this is a powerful medium for all the reasons we know. And our position, and I firmly believe this intellectually as well, is that good content is going to drive audiences in the end. Layering on additional enhanced services is good, but we're in an industry of highly differentiated, finite goods and services, and in such a landscape, great things are going to stand out, and that's what people are going to be drawn to in a post-COVID world as they were pre-COVID. So I think curated solutions, really bespoke selections of items, and compelling reasons to get people to come to whatever platform it is you have, whether that's a museum, a gallery, an art fair, or auction house, whatsoever, are going to be the main key forward to boosting those audiences and creating more compelling reasons to sustain and grow audiences in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
Just on that, there's what we noticed in Nigeria, as an example, is that the online business of art just basically democratized the whole system of having people come into the gallery space, because in Nigeria in particular, accessibility to galleries for artists in particular is limited, and also the ability of a lot of creators to exhibit their works wherever they're based was always very difficult. So what online has done for us as a group of artists in Nigeria is that it's make work more accessible to a larger audience for artists. A lot of artists who ordinarily did not have the means to exhibit their works, they're also challenging the notion of how works are supposed to be displayed, because all of us have this idea that it has to be in this particular room, on this particular wall, this kind of lighting. Things are beginning to change, and people are beginning to challenge the way traditionally we've been doing business with arts. So for me, it's the fact that the world is opening up to a lot more artists, and online business has just made it easier for a lot more people to participate in this space. And also the collectors. There were just a small bunch of people, the same old people we see every time at all the auctions and exhibitions. Now we have a newer type of audience and collectors coming into the space that we never experienced before.
As the audience grows for collecting art, as you say, and for collecting objects as well, and as the price point or the point of entry lowers in whatever way for what it means to collect art. The question is, does the idea of value and art as a store of value change? Because I think that one of the many reasons why people did or did not participate in the art market as rigorously or vigorously or broadly as they for years was this notion that art in whatever way was even things that people within the art world think of as very low priced, $5,000, $6,000. This idea that this was something that would probably or hopefully grow in value. People did not approach it like a car or a lamp or a chair. And as people have become more comfortable purchasing art online, do you think they need to be more comfortable thinking about the art not as an investment, but as something that in whatever way is going to enhance their life, but then not have a resale value? And how do you guys manage expectations in that respect?
I think, like in any market, as you have new clients and new participants come in, there's going to be a learning curve, and there's going to be a little bit of a shaking out at some point when the piece that they bought for, let's say, 10,000, thinking that it'll go up, by double within a year, doesn't necessarily take place. But in the long run, I think that a large part of the story of buying art, of collecting art, is this idea of art as a store of value. And I don't think that's going to go away.
I mean, this is a personal view, which is that you shouldn't really collect art as a store of value. You should collect art because you love it and it enhances your life and it's something you want to live with. Whether it's a $1 million piece or a $10,000 piece or a $10 piece, I think value is in the eye of the beholder, and I think it's if you look over time, art has generally been a pretty good investment, but I don't think that would be the reason why people would buy art at any value.
I find it so. I mean, yes, absolutely. You should only buy things that you love. But I think for the vast majority of people who are spending money, particularly now as more people begin to participate in the art market, I have not met anyone who will spend $5,000 on a print or a photograph or a painting and assume that it's going to go to zero. Or I think there is the expectation or at least the perception that it, in whatever way, is at the very least going to hold its value. Please.
And part of that is when the painting is $1 million or $100,000.
Yeah. Well, the only information about art that leaves the art world is about the market. And it's been mentioned that the internet, especially over the past year, has brought a lot more transparency to the market. And the question is, will we reach singularity and have a truly transparent market and, create space for artists to sort of attach value to conceptual work, distributed ownership of their projects, and hopefully a new narrative about art beyond the market. Of course, the market is, supporting so much activity, but it would be incredible to kind of, have more of a general consciousness about how artists participate in addressing social issues, urbanism, which isn't collectible.
Truly.
And James, on this topic of value, I would think about the trillions of dollars that people spend on mass-produced, depreciating, increasingly disgusting signals of wealth, whether they are handbags or furs or luxury cars. And I think the tide is turning against that kind of consumption. For, in many cases, significantly less money, people can be patrons of the arts. They can support the career of an artist who they'd like to see thrive and engage with that, truly engage with that artist. They can bring something that they love into their home to beautify it. And as a bonus, if they do their homework, they very well may be buying something that will appreciate. And I think it's lovely when you buy something that won't, just because you love it. One of the things I'll note that my company is working on is democratizing all of the value signals so that those are not only held by people on the inside. Information about representation and solo shows and museum purchases and who's being shown at what fairs are all signals of future value. And for some people, they'll buy art because they love it. Others are going to buy art because they're worried about inflation and they want to be a supporter of the arts and they want to bring something beautiful into their home and they'd like to see it appreciate. And I want to make sure that, at least at Artsy, we want to meet the collectors where they are and give them the tools to buy in whatever way motivates them and in whatever way helps to expand the art market.
It's interesting that you say value signals, and it's interesting that multiple people here have mentioned the idea of democratizing the art market, because each one of you in your own way is a gatekeeper. Art fairs reject far more applicants to participate in their fairs than they accept. But you have many people who would love an exhibition at the Serpentine, and Christie's similarly is, yes, auction houses are clearing houses, but they're also in the business of making sure that the things that they clear are in whatever way going to be a part of some sort of market zeitgeist. And Bola, yourself, you are involved in the actual production of the content, which means that you are the person who is helping to really dictate what people see. And the question then is that, yes, you all would like to scale up, right? And yet at the same time, you guys are in whatever way dictating that scale. And so the question is there anything that is lost as you try to grow? Are there compromises that you guys feel you have to make? Are there ways in which you guys are discovering that growth isn't necessarily the best thing? This is really hits on the most fascinating part of this entire conversation, which is yes, scale is exciting, but at what cost? And it's very possible that you guys are all going to say there's no cost, but I'm very interested to hear about this.
Well, I'll jump in. For me personally, what we've been trying to do in TerraCulture is to ensure that we bring in as many players as possible into the space. Mike was mentioning earlier about having people who invest a lot of money in things that really, at the end of the day, value to you might be different to what is value to me. But a lot of people, especially in Nigeria, where we have a lot of young people who are artistically inclined, who would benefit from the support of philanthropists or people who will be willing to invest in the space, who are just not interested. So you have a lot of young artists who are forced to stay at home. They're forced to keep their art under their beds because there's nobody that is going to access it or assist them in taking it out to the larger public. And when the big players come in, the TerraCultures, the Sotheby's, and what have you in Nigeria also, all they do is they take just that tiny fraction. So what I'm about is, how do we get art to the general mass? If galleries, I know galleries will talk about overexposure, keeping the value, all of that. That is selfish interest on the part of galleries, and I'm a gallery owner. But if we want to put art in the public space and allow more players to come in, I think online is probably the best thing that has ever happened to artists. We're taking more and more exhibitions in my space. We're allowing a lot more young artists bring their work for the world to see, and hopefully we'll be able to do a lot more from that as opposed to just using that physical space for us.
Yeah,
James,
one thing that I
think you've. Oh, go ahead, Noah.
No. Go for it.
I think you raised an important question. My company and some of my friends on the call here are aggregators. We're working hard to bring a lot of art into one place so that people can more easily enjoy it and consume it. And by definition, if you're aggregating, you stand in between the buyer and the seller. You're by definition gatekeeping. And it puts a big responsibility on each of us. And I'll give you a specific example. One of the things we looked at in our company about 1.5 years ago was how our algorithms were presenting artists to our collectors. Because we have 100,000 artists represented all of the world's most in-demand artists, but algorithms tend to learn patterns. And it turned out everyone clicked on Picasso and Warhol, everyone. And as a result, when people were looking for recommendations of artworks, our algorithms were recommending, generally speaking, dead white men. And that is not the kind of art market that we want to help create at Artsy. And we've put a big investment of product and technology effort in our own company into ensuring that our algorithms and the way that we represent art to our collectors is inclusive and is anti-racist. And I think when you sit in the middle of the market, like we do and like some of my friends on the call do, it gives you a big responsibility that you have to live up to make sure that the marketplace that you are presenting to your collectors is one that's inclusive and fair and truly representative of the art world that we want to help create.
No, you were going to say?
Well, I was just going to touch on the elusive and as yet unmentioned sort of quality parameter, right? Like art is essentially valueless, but there are these qualities that imprint and stamp value, and a lot of them are contextually defined, i.e. who owns what, where something was exhibited, et cetera. But I think that that's important because as the boundaries of art shapeshift and expand, there is a certain undergirding quality parameter, I still believe, to what defines great art. And from an Art Basel standpoint, I think echoing off of a little what Mike was driving at in terms of expanding and revisiting certain parameters. I mean, we as an organization are doing precisely that and shifting some of the very fundamental criteria for participation, walking back some of the protocols in terms of number of years in existence, for example, that a gallery has to be around to participate in a main sector of one of our shows, tweaking and modifying some of the parameters regarding artist representation. And we are, as I think many organizations are, going to look and feel different, and that's going to be even better for all involved in the future. But I still come back to those quality parameters as well, because as gatekeepers and as value drivers in the market, that's what's going to keep people coming back and create sustainable value and long-term audiences and gains in the years to come, for sure, however great the market continues to grow.
Jeremy, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I mean, I want to kind of build off of what Noah was saying, because I think that for the most part, growth for growth's sake never really makes much sense to me. And I think that as the art world has ballooned from the 60s, when it was, let's say, 1,000 people in New York, to, the global audience that we have now, and especially during the pandemic, when it's been supercharged with Christie's and Sotheby's and Phillips offering so many online auctions, and before the pandemic with so many fairs, there were downsides to that. Collectors become overwhelmed with the surfeit of options. They tune out all the noise. Galleries were struggling to keep up with the expenses of participating in all these fairs. They felt a pressure to do so to meet their clients. And, as we opened up the art world to this global audience, and prices kind of dictated where everything was going, we see artists have, very quick rise and falls in terms of their careers, where, 1 year they could be riding high and a few years later their prices might crater. But at the same time, gatekeepers exist for a reason at the end of the day. And I think we learned that a little bit the hard way in the news world the past 5 years. And in the art world, gatekeepers have a role. And however many artists Artsy offers, or however many artists are available at Art Basel or Frieze or are offered in a Christie's sale, some of them are going to be good, some of them are going to be bad, but or not bad, but not necessarily won't keep their value in the long term. And I think that it's up to the gatekeepers' responsibility to make sure that they're doing the most part to diversify the artists that are being presented and present voices that traditionally haven't been heard in the past. But at the end of the day, experts are experts for a reason, and you should probably listen to them.
Dirk, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, it goes into exactly the same direction. I think we shouldn't forget that the art market is a commercial system And we all are offering artworks we believe we can sell, or we know we can sell. And within that context, places like Art Basel or Christie's also have a filter function. And I think the initial filter, whether something sells or not, will remain as the core of this. I think the important point is to understand that with that filter system, these companies play a certain role in a canonization, and this is something we see when it comes to cutting-edge contemporary art. This is when we are all offering stuff that hasn't been canonized, that works by artists who have never seen kind of an institutional show, etc., etc. I think that is the moment where we all need awareness of what our work contributes to the whole system.
Simon?
Yeah, sorry, again, just going to build on the point, but just as technology extends audiences, one of the things that technology does is it allows us not to be constrained by the physical size of the building in which we're holding our fair, or the tent in which we're holding our fair. So in New York, we were able to accommodate only 60 galleries, and that was a really difficult, and we were inevitably excluding some fantastic art. And the digital extension, which allowed us to include another 140 odd galleries, was tremendously useful. And so back to your kind of the original premise of the panel, another great opportunity for presenting more art and not being constrained by physical walls, of course, is the internet.
This then leads to this next question, which all of you have already touched on, which is this idea of gatekeeping, which is a less generous version of that, is basically saying middlemen, right? And middlemen in the art world and culture more generally, not specifically the art market, but middlemen are in whatever way the creators of value, not simply monetary value, but perceptions of worth. And please tell me if you guys think I'm wrong, but in many respects, particularly at a high level, the curators, the writers to a lesser extent, but dealers to a much greater extent, are in whatever way people who are not only ascribing value, but maintaining it. And so the question is, as we look to technology in the internet for an increasing hybridization, how that imprimatur, because I would argue that it is an imprimatur, how that imprimatur is maintained and sustained even as the spectrum broadens and significantly. And I think it's a question for all of you, because it's a question that, at least in my opinion, all of you in whatever way need to grapple with. But I'll let you take it.
Well, I think it's a great question, James, because I think it's something that, in a world in which artists, or at least most of the artists that we work with via our galleries, they don't produce infinite bodies of work. What they create is not commodity. It's highly specific. And for most of them, they're working years to produce a singular show. And the problem, or the challenge rather, to creating and sustaining value using the internet is that the old time-tested means of placing work and essentially controlling supply through the filters that have historically been applied is inherently challenging, because a buy now function doesn't afford you the ability to do the things that you historically did. And the inverse of that, of course, is that on the one hand, it does allow you to get in front of additional audiences, right, that you might not have accessed previously. But it also opens, and I think this is what we're going to see as we look forward in the next years, entirely new pathways for artists and those varying intermediaries and producing bodies to think totally creatively around how to take work to market and what types of streams to create around that. Really, the whole journey, we're seeing this already on the NFT side of things and in the digital and crypto sphere, but the whole journey and universe of what an artist produces and what the artist's place in that journey is, and what the role of a gallery or middleman or middlewoman is, I think will radically change in the future. And I think that we're going to see a huge, I don't want to say rebirth, but a huge flourishing of creativity in this space. Crisis begets creativity, and I think this is one of these beautiful moments where we're finally catching up to the potential of what a post-internet world can be for the creative class, and in our case, artists.
Jeremy?
I think we're also seeing that with immersive art and things like Superblue, which is a collaboration between the global gallery Pace and Laurel Powell Jobs, charging people an admissions fee to experience a piece of art that in the past may not necessarily have been the most easily commercialized art. But I think, to go back to your original question, James, I think in many ways, the art world has similar parallels to the luxury world. And I think that just in the same way that fashion brands like Louis Vuitton and Chanel, at first maybe were fearful about offering perfumes because it would devalue their brand. I think during the pandemic, Christie's and Sotheby's and Art Basel and Frieze, which are two of the best fair brands in the art world, and Artsy, which is perhaps the most globally recognized art marketplace online. Less so for the cultural participants on the call, just because I have less experience with them. But I think they realize just how strong their brands are, and that they can offer online sales. They can offer online versions of their fairs without it tarnishing their brand in any way. And I think you're going to see over the next year more experimentation and more testing of that model, of just how far they can go, where their name is still valuable, their brand is still valuable, it carries weight, but at the same time, and caters to their core audience, but at the same time really trying to appeal to a new collecting class, a new audience.
Mike?
There's a generational shift happening right now, and the way that boomers bought art is not the way that millennial and Gen Z collectors are buying or want to buy art. People who've spent their life booking their vacations and buying their cars and now buying their homes on the internet expect that same level of service and experience and the ability to buy in a single click anything in this world that they love. And a lot of galleries, a lot of my friends on this call have figured this out and are meeting those younger collectors who are inheriting $15 trillion over the next 10 years, right where they are, and enabling the digital experience that they expect.
Simon, you had your...
Yeah, I was just going to make a quick point, really, which was digital, of course, has the power to disintermediate. And in the music industry, when a musician can go straight to a consumer through YouTube, everyone thought the labels would be disintermediated, and of course they weren't. And the book publishers were not disintermediated by the Kindle, even though an author can publish directly onto onto the Amazon Kindle channel. And industries can be disintermediated, but if the let's say the middlemen and women in these industries, if they do add value, they find ways to play value in the digital role, and I think that's what we're all trying to do. And so I'm pretty confident that whether it be galleries or fairs or cultural institutions, they will not be disintermediated by what's happening right now.
Maybe it's also that, rather than thinking about it as it's the context. We're not gatekeepers, we're creating context, and these infinite virtual worlds and the blockchain, which creates an infinite amount of potential for value, and it's about resource creation rather than extraction. I think we just have to kind of consider our role in that a little bit differently.
In addition, I think that we're at a crossroads. Things are changing rapidly, and I think that the COVID lockdown and everything moved things, accelerated things for us generally in the art space. And I think it's important that everybody takes advantage of the changing times, because the millennial generation and a lot of younger people who are having more and more access to finance are not, even the type of art that they're interested in is not typically the traditional type of art that we've sold for a long time. So it's important that the digital galleries come on and begin to understand that things are changing. The look and feel, the taste, and what people are looking to enjoy as art has changed phenomenally. And
I'm so sorry to interrupt. We're out of time. I apologize. I really appreciate all of you guys taking the time to speak with us. This was a really generative and interesting conversation, and I hope all of you had at least some enjoyment doing it. It was
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks again.
Very much.
Bye,
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.